Engesvang Station. A perfectly normal provincial railway station. The train arrives. People get off. People get on. The train departs, disappearing down the track eastwards to the next station, Silkeborg. In former times, the eastbound train had barely left the station before it had to stop again at Moselund. It's a mere 1,332 metres between the two stations. The station building in Moselund has now been converted to a private residence. However, up until 1979, the train also stopped here. Moselund Station is actually the elder of the two. It was built at the same time as the railway, which opened in 1877. The explanation is to be found today at the bottom of Bulling Lake. One began drying out the lake in the 1870s, and after a rather hesitant beginning, a large-scale peat production was started in the area. The first great attempt was spectacular, in that the most modern equipment of the day was imported from Germany. Aerial ropeways and dumping wagon tracks were built to and from Moselund Station. The area was more or less the Silicon Valley of its time, and trains stopped for a bit longer than necessary at Moselund so that passengers could admire the modern peatworks in the dried-out lake. It has more than likely been a cause of great amusement for locals to ascertain that the peat produced by modern industry had one drawback: it wouldn't burn. This meant bankruptcy for the large established peat company, but in no way put an end to peat production in the area. On the contrary, a very large peat production came into being. Not so modern perhaps, but the peat produced could burn. There have been more than 10 peatworks in operation in the dried-out lake. The demand for railway and peat labourers resulted in a great influx of all kinds of casual labourers. Turf toughs and railway ruffians, partial to a drop of the hard stuff and a game of cards. Barracks were built to house the many new arrivals. Hordes of Polish labourers were imported. One of the works is called the Polak plant. The addition to the population of so many people affected the area immensely, and local businesses boomed. However, it was also a great challenge and a minor cultural shock for local inhabitants. The school teacher, J.P. Obo, wrote the following: "Horrendous amounts of hard liquor and Bavarian beer are consumed, and both young and old become accustomed to a way of life which can only have destructive consequences." The workers, however, began seriously thinking about their situation, and a trades union was formed in 1904. Sunday being the only free day on which union meetings could be held, a dissension quickly arose between the church and the union as to where one should be on Sundays. The season began at the beginning of May and lasted until late September. All hands were needed, men, women and children. There was no discussion as to whether a woman's place was in the home, or that child labour could be a problem. Everyone was needed. When the season ended at the beginning of autumn, most of the casual labourers moved away from the area, not to return until the following spring. The station at Engesvang was opened in 1914, when Engesvang lay on the main road and thus had a better location for the transport of peat. The First and Second World Wars created a greater demand for fuel. Subsequently, however, peat production slowly faded from the picture. Nowadays, the tale of peat lies buried like that of another Atlantis at the bottom of Bulling Lake. The lake was re-established in 2004-2005. It was expected to take between 3 and 7 years But nature took everyone by surprise, and it took only 6 months. Some of the few souvenirs from the turf times can be seen these days at the museum at Closterlun by the banks of Bulling Lake.